I want to welcome you all to the Johnny and James reading series. Tonight our guest speaker is Karen Mockler, as you know. We're very happy to see you all here. The reason I'm here is to give a little pitch for the place you're sitting. Somebody else will say a bunch of nice things about Karen before she starts. You are in the Heritage Room of the the Lincoln City Libraries. This room is dedicated to the literary heritage of the state of Nebraska. It contains works by and about Nebraska authors, anything that was written by a Nebraska author, somebody who had some connection, not only born in the state of Nebraska, but spent time in Nebraska. We try and have at least one copy of their works in the room. The room is furnished with a gift of furniture from a former governor of the state of Nebraska, Samuel McKelvey, and we learned today that the furniture, which is ebony and ivory inlaid, actually came from the estate of Neville Chamberlain. This rug that you're sitting on was part of their own personal home furnishings. The room is open for programs, both to the public and for special programming such as tonight on a regular basis. Also open for people to do research and enjoy working in the room. The room is not supported at this time by tax funds, and part of what we're trying to do as members of the Friends Group is to raise money for the endowment grant which we have received from the National Humanities Foundation. It's a 3-to-1 grant. In order to raise our endowment, we need to raise $300,000, and then the fund will give us $100,000. We are slowly but surely making our way towards that goal, and anything that you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated. The little basket outside is not for Karen, charming and deserving though she may be. Those dollars go to support the Heritage Room, and we ask that you consider giving something. Thank you very much.
I'd like to welcome you to the Heritage Room in the Johnny James reading series. For those of you unfamiliar with the reading series, the Johnny James reading series is a monthly reading series here in the Heritage Room. It features Nebraska writers reading from their works. This evening's reader is Karen Mockler. Karen is a 1987 graduate from the University of Nebraska English Department. Some of you may recognize Karen as being a former employee of the library. She worked at Young People's Services at the library here for a number of years. Karen has also worked as an editorial assistant at the Prairie Schooner, University of Nebraska. And this evening she will read from a manuscript for a recently completed novel. This manuscript won the 1988 Sinclair Award, which is given to the best incoming manuscript at the University of Miami, Ohio. Karen?
This last novel I completed is tentatively entitled Pride, but I've been having a real hard time coming up with solid names for novels recently. So if anybody is inspired during my reading, they come up with a different title they think they like better, just be sure and let me know. And I'm open to your ideas. The odd numbered chapters are the chapters that take place on Earth, and the even numbered chapters are the ones that take place in not exactly heaven, but what I'm referring to as the netherworld. So if you think you're getting confused, I'll tell you the number of the chapter before I read each one. That'll kind of clue you in. Most of the major characters are introduced in the first chapter. The two I think that aren't introduced are Jason, who's an Earth character. He is the best friend or an old friend of the main character's father. And the other character who's not introduced in the first chapter is Chloe, who is a heavenly character. She is the little sister of Marty, who's one of the main characters up in heaven. Chapter 1. When I walk down the street, I like to pretend that all the young men are falling in love with me right there on the spot. If it's bright out, I wear my sunglasses. Not because the sunlight hurts my eyes, though it does. Because if I squint, it's hard to believe they're falling in love with me. I know they're not. I especially like wearing these dark little sunglasses of mine because I look like a movie star in them, and because you can stare a body straight in the eye and they have no knowledge of it. Best of all is when a body with dark little sunglasses passes me with mine. Then anything can happen. My heart fairly stops. I'm writing a book. My main characters are Robin, Marty, and Kate. Robin and Kate are both girls. I'm a girl, too. My name is Lane. They're all friends in college, and they die, and then they are refused admission by St. Peter because they are not true believers. I, too, am not a true believer. I do not have TB, you might say. My mother has TB, and my little sister, too, but she is only 7. I hardly think having TB counts until you've reached puberty, because most all of us have TB up till then, right? It's only when your hormones start jiggling that God sifts the sheep from the goats, the wheat from the barley, the cute little bullfroggies from the horny toads, and I shall always be, sin of hubris, a horny toad, horn blowing deep down and dirty in the mud of our planet. God bless America. Up until the time I was 10, we lived in a house on the edge of town. It was a half-wild neighborhood with weedy fields for backyards and mailboxes out on the road, and it was a road we lived on, not a street. Every time it started resembling a street with smooth-packed pavement, they would come out and sand it again. I didn't like the sand. It caused me and my bike to wipe out more than once, and the dust from passing cars got in my eyes, so I learned to walk with my eyes closed. When I was 10, though, my father died. Within a month of his funeral, my mother had us packed up and shipped into town. I asked her 14 times why we had to move. Too many memories, she said, but no time did I believe her. She had always complained about the bugs and the weeds and the drive for groceries, and the passing trains, which whistled at night and woke us in the darkness. I loved these things. She returned to the church, and then a new monkey man came to town, and he heard about the recently widowed Mrs. Haynes, and he came to see her. He had heard of her devoutness. You may wonder how I know all this, being only 10 at the time, but that is precisely why I do. I was paraded into the parlor in my best dress, my father's funeral dress, and made to pass cookies. I passed cookies for 2 people and then had some myself back in the kitchen, and I heard him just fine over my chewing, but I didn't need to eavesdrop. He was putting it all out on display before I ever left the room, so you know what's coming. My mother married him and contracted TB. He is a preacher. He is not wealthy like Oral Roberts. He has never been on TV, but that is his job, saving souls. We don't see so much of him nowadays. My little sister was born when I was 11. Her name is Roberta. Most people call her Bobby. Most people call me Lenny. It's just a thing with people wanting to nickname every soul they meet. It doesn't mean anything. Chapter 10. Before receiving his or her new body, the future recipient can still return to Earth. This is because the afterlife body is a precise representation of the mortal body, and so still connected to our earthly world. Because it is alike, however, it is decaying, for the mortal body is dead. But because it is dead, because there is no blood pumping, no brain activity, no operating nervous system, there is no pain. Why then, how then, can the owner operate it at all? On will. Will, like muscles, like oxygen, like food, can move it, but he of 2 broken legs is out of some luck. Will, operating as surely in the next world as it does on Earth. And sometimes will is as natural, as unconscious a thing as breathing, expanding the lungs to take in air. And sometimes, even like breathing, it is not. Marty's body didn't have that long, yet of the 3, he was the only one who really wanted to make a visit before he said goodbye to it. They left Rebot on a shaky excuse and hightailed it back to Earth. Chloe was reading a book in her room, waiting for the funeral. 2 hours ago, her mother had told her to start getting ready, so she did it. No one had bothered her since. She had her bare legs propped straight up against the wall. She lay on her back. The plaid skirt had slid off her legs and fallen down around her stomach. What did it matter? She was alone. She was reading. Chloe didn't worry about things like bare legs. Chloe was 14. She was reading Wuthering Heights for the first time. She spent a lot of time looking in the mirror. She had curly red hair, and she didn't believe in God, and her mother had set out a brown skirt and a hunter green sweater for her to wear to the funeral because she had absolutely nothing black. Chloe felt Marty's absence like she might have felt the absence of her uterus. She didn't need it now, but in 10 more years she might want it a whole lot. It meant something, his being gone. But for now she had Emily Bronte. She was trying to comprehend passion, and whatever her brother's death meant to her, it wasn't that. Chloe! If she had reached the novel's close, seen ghostly lovers walking on the moor, she might have heeded the disembodied voice sooner. As it was, she ignored it. Chloe, it's me! She looked up. Who? Me. Marty was trying to bring his body into the room, but it was very, very hard, for at the same time, he was holding Kate's hand to ground him in the gray world. He did not want to get lost in between. Who? Chloe put her book down and lost her place. Where are you? She sat up and looked around the room. She walked to the door. Marty! She opened the door and looked out. She shut it again, turned back, and faced an empty room. Marty, huh? Yes. Marty tried harder, and then Chloe saw him, but pale. Her hands flew to her face in fright. Marty, what are you doing? It was half shriek and half whisper. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, said Marty. You look bad. Chloe squinted. Oh, my God. I'm burned, said Marty, coming in stronger now. I know, you look terrible. Does it hurt? It looks like it hurts. No, it really doesn't, but I have to go soon. I just came to tell you something. Chloe couldn't help staring, though she knew it was rude. Do you want me to get Mom? I can get her, you know. She's in the kitchen making string bean casserole with Chinese things on top. No, Chloe, I just came to tell you. Why? Marty stopped. He cocked his head and slid his eyes at her. What do you mean, why? You don't even know what I'm going to say yet. So tell me, said Chloe. All right, said Marty. Yeah. Why don't you wait a second already? Someday some guy is going to be trying to ask you to marry him, and you'll just keep going, what? What? That's stupid, said Chloe. And then he'll punch you in the nose. Chloe snorted like a pig. Okay, she said. Marty came closer. Remember, Chloe, how we used to talk about God, and you said it was stupid, and I said, I don't know, and you said I was dumb? Yeah. Chloe was squinting again, but not hard. He was getting solid. She was trying to concentrate. Well, he's up there, and there is a heaven, too, with gates and all, and I'm letting you know now. Why? Said Chloe. Mom's not going to believe me, you know. You can't tell her anyway, so don't. You know how upset she'd be. She wouldn't be upset. I mean, she would. She'd send me to a psychiatrist, but she wouldn't be upset. Not really. Not that I'm going to tell her, because I'm not. Where's Kate? She's with me. I want to see her. Kate came in faster than Marty, but not as strong. Chloe squinted up again. Hi, Kate, she said. You look a lot better than Marty, but what's new? We have to go soon and get Marty his new body. How is everybody? How's school? Okay. Really? You're getting a new body? It's weird up there, Chloe, said Kate. I guess. Chloe giggled again. She slapped her hands down on her knees. We gotta go, said Marty, and we can't come back again, so this is it. Oh. Chloe looked at the floor. Are you gonna go see Dad? Marty shook his head. I don't have time. Now, will you remember what I told you? Sure, said Chloe. There is a God. That's right. And when you get older, you may try to convince yourself, or somebody else may try to, that you just imagined this, but you didn't. You have to remember that you really talked to us, and it's all true, no matter what. Chloe nodded. I'll remember. Okay, said Marty. Don't let me down. Is it fun? Asked Chloe. What? Said Marty. Heaven. Marty smiled. It better be. Kate went first. Marty faded out slower, and he looked awfully serious, even though he smiled. His eyes went last, burning like they were still on fire. And Chloe knew that she had to be good now and believe because of Marty, and he wouldn't have come unless he really wanted to see her in heaven. Chloe felt awfully special. She pulled down on her sweater, which was really getting too small for her, and went out to face the music. Chapter 11. Bobby was still up when I got home from work tonight. It was 9, so she should have been to bed an hour before that, but when I came in, I saw her flashlight under the covers. She was reading her comic books. Hi, Bobby, I said, and started pulling off my uniform. Hi, she said. I've been pinching myself to keep awake. What took you so long? Well, if I'd known you were waiting up for me, I would have left early. This satisfied Bobby. She didn't know I was kidding. I started unbuttoning my dress, and Bobby hit her face. You shouldn't let me see you naked, she said. I'm not naked. I let my brown uniform drop to the floor and stepped out of it. I gave it a kick with the tip of my foot and floated it 3 feet before it landed. Bobby looked back at me. You shouldn't let me see your bra. Why not? Nevertheless, I turned my back when I took it off. You know, Bobby, in a few more years you'll be wearing one of these yourself. "No, I won't," she screeched. I put on my pajamas and climbed into the top bunk. The more I tried not to, the more I thought about them. Finally, I brought my palms to rest lightly on my poor, defenseless breasts. Something in what Bobby said made me sad. They seemed so dirty now, and useless, just absurd. "Lenny," said a voice. "I think you're saved." I forgot about my injured parties. "Why?" "Well, it was today, this afternoon in handwriting. You believe in Jesus, you just aren't his true friend. So you do believe. That's all you have to do." "Satan believed in God, Bobby, and he's in hell." "He did?" "Sure. That was his whole problem. He was jealous." "But he didn't accept Christ as his personal savior." "Christ wasn't even around then, Bobby." "That's a lie," said Bobby. "He was." "No, he hadn't even been born in Bethlehem yet." "Well, why did he go to hell then?" I hesitated a long time before I told her. "Pride," she repeated. "That's not a sin. It's because he gave Eve and Adam the apple." "No. He was the devil before God ever made Adam and Eve. He was the devil before God ever made the earth. He used to be an angel, you know." "I know," said Bobby. Well, you have to love God, Bobby, for it to work." "Well, you should," said Bobby. "But I don't." "Well, you should." "I should," I agreed. Then the lower bunk was very quiet, and I too was quiet. I didn't think she was asleep, though. She wasn't snoring, and she usually does. I leaned over and looked down at her. It was dark, but I could see her face was buried in the pillow. "Bobby?" No answer. "Bobby, don't cry." Bobby began to thrash about. She pulled the pillow out from underneath her and hit me in the face with it. She got ready to take another swing at me, but this time I grabbed it before she could. I yanked it away from her. "You're going to go to hell," she shouted. "We'll just wait and see about that." I'm a little sore on this point, and she brings it up pretty often. "You are," she cried. "Dummy." If anyone deserves eternal happiness, it's Roberta. I'm just not sure heaven is it. In time, she did fall asleep, and she snored. I banged the wall, and she stopped temporarily. My father snored, and I keep thinking she is his daughter, too. She has 10 times more spunk than my mother. Why did he marry her? They think all babies born on earth are ordained by God. He couldn't be like that. God's no fool. Chapter 15. Last night I went to the park with Bobby. We played on the swings and practiced hitting mostly. Bobby wants to make Little League All-Stars next year. She is not very good. About the time the sun was setting, we had a running race across the field to the drinking fountain on the far side. I was running fast. Roberta hates to lose, but she knows when I'm faking, and she hates that even more. My right foot snagged on a gopher hole, and then I was floating, and finally I landed flat out. It was grass, and not bad or bloody, but the one part of my body that really took the blow was my breasts. They were the first thing to hit the ground. They were shock absorbers. I got up kind of slow and hobbled along. My breasts hurt so much all I wanted to do was take them in my hands and cuddle them. There were people around, but finally I did anyway. "What are you doing?" shrieked Roberta. I didn't say a thing. I just kept moving toward the fountain. "What are you doing?" She rushed up and pulled at my arm, hissing. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm holding my breasts on," I said. "If I don't, they'll fall right off." "Good," said Roberta. "Let 'em." "That'd hurt too much," I said, looking at her. "Serves you right," said Roberta. "That's what you get." "You shut up now," I said. "I'm in pain because of you." Roberta put her fingers on a little flat chest and started prancing around me in circles. I tried to reach out and grab her, but she made like she was going to punch my right breast, and I covered it up again. "I know what those are," she said. "Good." I didn't look at her. She was a little freak. I just kept on toward the fountain. "You're a sinner," said Bobby. "Guess what?" I said. "So are you." "So what?" "I'm saved." I stopped walking and just looked at her. She stopped too. She wasn't smiling like she usually does, and for the first time since I could remember, I didn't like her. "I guess if you're with Jesus, you can be just as mean and rotten as you like," I said. "I guess Jesus doesn't mind. I guess he never said anything about loving your neighbor. I guess all that part in there is just a pack of lies somebody just up and stuck in the Bible for a joke. Maybe you should run on home and cut it out of there." And she did. Ran home anyhow. Mama was waiting for me in the kitchen. My breast had pretty much stopped hurting by then, so I had my hands back in my pockets where they belonged. "Lane," said my mother, "what happened in the park?" "I fell on my breasts and put my hands on them, and Bobby told me I was a sinner," I said. "That's not the story Bobby gave me," she said. "No." I looked at my mother sitting there in her pink robe, skinny woman like a hungry chicken. I'd be just like her if it weren't for my satanic breasts. "No," she said. She leaned forward to pick a fuzzball off my skirt, and her robe puckered open. "She doesn't have any. And if she did, they'd be all caved in from the ravages of time. That's what happens, even in developed countries." I sat down across the table from her and took off my shoes. "You're smelling up the kitchen," she said, but it was only habit. I brought up a foot to my nose and sniffed it. It was okay. "You ought to talk to Bobby," I said. "And why is that? Sounds like you've been doing plenty of talking yourself." "She doesn't understand about Jesus." "She understands enough to love him." "She doesn't understand he was a good man." "He was more than that," she said. I shrugged. "You've got no business, no right, feeding false ideas into her head." "Who says they're false?" "Lane." My mother sighed. "What do I hate? I hate this. And in point of fact, I don't know if Jesus was a good man, but the Bible says so. I was just granting them their own turf." "At least talk to her about breasts," I said. I picked my shoes off the table and stood. "Lane," said my mother, "are you leaving?" "I don't know," I said. "Should I?" "Bobby said you told her Satan didn't deserve to be in hell." I shook my head. "Well, what is it you think you said?" I sighed and sat down again. I put my shoes back on. "I said Satan's sin was pride." My mother didn't say anything, and neither did I. I stood. "I'm not a bad person," I said. "I never said you were." "No, you never did." But on my way to the door, her eyes flicked over my body that way they do, and I knew what she was thinking. I didn't go out right away. I had a lot to say to my mother, and I usually don't, but still I kept most of it inside me. I said a little. "I won't talk any more to Bobby," I said. "It's none of my business, but you should tell her about breasts." My mother looked away, and I went out into the night. I didn't come back until I knew they were both asleep. Something is eating me up inside, and I even know what it is. It is anger, and I'm angry at the Lord, and he is going to have to deal with me before this is all over and done with. We are going to have it out, just him and me. And I'll give my soul for that, because I'm not scared of the devil. Pride is my sin, too. It's no big deal. Chapter 17. He is going to speak at one of those Jesus rallies they have in the Civic Auditorium. They pack him in for those. I watched Jimmy Swaggart convert about 15,000 Mexicans the other night on TV. They were in a football stadium somewhere, and he was down on the field in his three-piece suit, pacing around on a platform with his microphone. There was another man following him. He was dressed the same, and he was pacing too, but in Spanish. Every time Jimmy shouted a sentence, the other man would too, and if Jimmy used some emotion and made his voice wavery, the other man would use wavery emotion too. Really, I thought he was better at it than Jimmy. He was just about crying. So all these Mexican people came down out of the stands and walked toward Jimmy, all raring to accept Jesus as their personal savior. Jesus Christ, the man called him. Now, I like Jesus fine, but I have troubles, and more troubles with this whole business. Jimmy was all exuberant at saving so many folks. Now, you know, most of them were already Catholics, and I do believe Catholics believe in Christ. I do believe he figures rather strongly into that religion. So what was Jimmy all exuberant about? Does he think Catholics are insincere, or is he just happy, thinking of all that converted cash he'll be getting now? So I'm going to this rally with Roberta and Mama, and he's going to speak. He is one of the opening acts for the big guys, like at a rock concert. Mama will probably expect me to take a walk down to the stage, even if I'm not saved, just so it'll look good. I wonder if I should. I don't want to make trouble. But there, God isn't going to look any more kindly on me if I do. Maybe he will strike me down as a hypocrite. He used to do things like that in the Old Testament. Is the Antichrist arrived? Was the Virgin Mary always a virgin? Why is bearing false witness against thy neighbor in a separate commandment from thou shalt not lie? It's lying after all. Did people not understand this long ago in the days of sheep? Their God is unkind and unjust, for I have always tried to be good, and if Daddy is an atheist, then he is in hell, and I won't be seeing him when I go to talk to God. You think God won't talk to me, but he will, because I'll make a lot of trouble for him otherwise, and he wouldn't dare strike me down, because I'm leaving testament of everything I do from here on out, and I'm going to put it every week in the safety deposit box so they can't get it. And only Jason will have the other key, and if I'm eliminated, he'll have my testament with which to avenge me. Wait and see. Chapter 19. Jason had a good show. He usually does. People bought things, and those who didn't buy admired. We order our dinners and sit looking at our menus anyway. It's something we like to do. That's a bargain, I say, pointing to the 2-egg special. So's this, says Jason, pointing to the silver dollar pancakes. Jason never really says that much about himself to me. This may be because I am so much younger, or because he is just not that way. People have a right to be as they like. It's popular nowadays to be laying all your cards out on the table the first time you meet someone, but I don't go for this. I do know that he was in love with some woman who decided she'd rather go out and journey the world than marry him. I don't know why it had to be that way. It seems like he might have journeyed that same world with her, but he didn't. So, he's alone. His friends have moved to far corners of the continent. Sometimes one will pass through on their way to somewhere else. This town is not a destination kind of place. But he's okay. What's on your mind, Lenny? He asks me, and I tell him God, because this is the truth. He stops the waitress in passing and orders some cheese balls so we can chew while we're waiting for something more substantial. You're getting like your mom, he says then, but he's smiling. He thinks I'm after my dad. I'm going to talk to the devil tonight and give him my soul if I can get an audience with God face to face. And what if they're both too easy to fit you in? Oh, I hadn't thought of this. Then I'll just have to wait till I die. Maybe by then you'll be sick and tired of both of them. I'm that now. Jason's a little on the heavy side anymore, so he makes a definite noise when he breathes. I hate this in other men, but in him I like it. I like to think it's the sound of him thinking. Brain respiration. Finally his brain finishes up and he speaks. Why do you care? He says, his face all cocked one way. Because if it's true, I say, it's unjust and ungodly, and you're going to change God. I'm going to talk to him, and he's going to tell me if there is any rationale at all for the way he operates. And what makes you so sure he operates this way your mother keeps insisting? What makes you so sure he operates at all? Nothing, I say. I have no idea. The cheese balls arrive. I watch Jason eat. Is that real cheese? I ask him, because they look suspicious to me. I don't know, says Jason through a mouthful. Try one and find out. So I do. If God is not the way they say he is, then how can so many people believe in him? How can my stepfather make any kind of money if he's not? But I know. I know it all, and I can't explain why it doesn't matter. I know folks have had conflicting faiths all through history, and someone's got to be wrong, and it might as well be my family. My sister thinks I'm a sinner, I say. So what? Jason expects more out of me, I can tell. Define that word for me. Tell me what a sin is. Who knows? Jason throws his hands up in the air. Maybe I'm a sinner too. Ask your sister. It's all stupid. Jason is right. But if they are right and I go to hell because I'm not blind and gullible, there will be hell to pay. I'm beginning to think there will be hell to pay if anyone goes. This is not such an easy world to get through. You know, sometimes I wonder what your mom was doing all that time she was married to your dad. My father was an atheist, Jason says, and I don't remember her ever sneaking off to pray back then. I'm afraid she's got the kind of faith that shifts with the breeze. I don't care what he says about my mother. I don't admire her. I guess I just take after the male side of the family, I say. Jason stares at me. His face goes weird. No, Lenny. No, you don't. I don't look at him. No one's ever said anything close to this before. Jason always acted like I was my father's fitting image, and that's how we liked it. I know I don't like this. And now he's talking about my dad being crazy and irresponsible and leaving us strapped with debts when he died, instead of money for my college education. And now he's talking about my father being smart and funny and dissolute, and me being 10 times stronger than he ever was. And you think I like hearing this? You think I need to? But I'm not saying a word. And another thing. Jason is pointing at me now, his finger working up and down. Your father didn't believe, and you do. You're about as close to being an atheist as a chicken is to swimming. I'm sliding into slow shock, but even as I go, I know there's one thing Jason's wrong about. I'm crazy too. Chapter 20. I should probably fill you in a little on what's been going on up in the netherworld, because we've taken some big jumps here. Rebodification is a place that they go to prevent their bodies from decaying. They can go back and they can get bodies that they've had at any time in their past lives. Robin and Marty just go back a short amount of time, so they basically look like they did right before they died. But Kate, who was kind of gorgeous and voluptuous before she died, decides she's going to go back and be her 9-year-old body again. She's still got her 19-year-old mind, but she's got a 9-year-old body, and this has created some troubles between her and Marty, who's her boyfriend. Also, redeployment is important to explain, too. That is where they go when they're ready to be reincarnated into a new life, which is basically what's been causing all of their problems up in the netherworld. They all refuse to be reincarnated. And there's really nothing else to do up there. Either you're committed to heaven or you're reincarnated. Otherwise, you just kind of wander around in this gray space, which they've been doing for months on end. At the point we're at right now, they're wandering without much hope of finding any other kind of escape but reincarnation, and they're starting to kind of fight amongst themselves, the three of them. Chapter 20. 3 days later, they came across a stranger. He was lying down flat in the dust, which is why they didn't see him sooner. When they did spy a shape about 300 feet off, none of them remarked upon it, though indeed it was remarkable to find anything defying the flatness of that netherworld floor. The figure, which they soon determined to be human, lay prostrate, his face not even turned to one side. They approached at a normal speed until they stood over him, Robin at his feet, Marty at his head. "He looks dead," Kate whispered, sticking some fingers in her mouth. "We're dead," said Marty. "Yeah, but not really." Kate crouched down in the dust a few feet from his body. Marty put a hand in the man's hair, which was very black, but the man did not respond. Marty leaned over and poked him in the ribs. The girls were so embarrassed they giggled. After a moment, the man groaned softly and began to move. They waited and watched as he settled himself again. He did not even look up. "Well, he's alive," said Marty cheerfully. At this, the man jerked and pushed himself upright, almost knocking into Robin in the process. "I am not," he cried. He was East Indian. They saw it in his eyes, his skin, and heard it in his voice. He stood on his toes now, turning from one of them to the next, the whites of his eyes rolling in his head. His hands were clenched and fists at his side. "We're not either, really," said Kate, "but you forget sometimes." "I do not," he cried, somewhat indignantly. "I meant you in the sense of the universal you," explained Kate. "What I really meant was we, everybody." "Ah." He smiled, showing beautiful white teeth. He sank off his toes until his shoes rested entirely on the ground. "That is a different matter. The English language is so confusing." The three of them nodded. The girls were trying not to laugh. "It is a long time since I have seen others such as myself," said the man. "I am astonished." "So am I," said Marty. "You'd think there'd be lots of people wandering around up here besides us." "Yes," said the man, "I would. And I am very astonished to see you three all together. Who are you?" "I'm Marty," said Marty. "I'm Kate," said Kate. "And I'm Robin," said Robin. "I am Rashim," said the man. He looked down at his white shirt, very dirty now, and neatly tailored tan pants, very wrinkled. He frowned sadly. "How long have you been up here?" Robin asked him. Rashim shook his head. "A long time. I am somewhat tired of it." "So are we," said Robin. "But you have others to talk to," said Rashim. "That's true," said Robin, without sounding entirely impressed. "How do you all come to be together?" asked Rashim. "Car accident," said Marty. Sadly, Rashim shook his head. "Have you been to the gates?" They nodded. Again, he shook his head. "I am not accustomed to such rejection." "Have you been to the redeployment center?" Kate asked him. Rashim nodded. "Did they let you see your file?" "I did not need to," said Rashim. "I have already lived 3 lives on Earth. I do not wish to return again." "How do you know you've lived before?" Marty asked. "I don't." "I did not know on Earth," said Rashim. "Only now do I remember. The first one I have only recalled very recently. It is less clear in my mind. Perhaps there are more lives I cannot recall yet." "But we can't recall any," said Marty. "Do you think it was our first time?" Rashim shrugged. I do not know. Perhaps. If that is so, I must congratulate you. Kate frowned. I can't understand why there aren't more people up here. Because everyone else believes in God, said Robin. That's why. Kate didn't respond. Because they're all going through redeployment, said Robin then. Or they found a way out of here, said Marty. Yes, said Kate. Perhaps they wandered for a time like you, said Rashim. But when there was no one to talk to, they finally decided to go back to Earth. But lose their memories! Kate wrung her hands. I have my memories now, said Rashim. He looked at her curiously. You are not a child. Kate nodded towards her friends. I'm the same age as them. Rashim threw back his head and laughed. I did not think of that. Well, I wish you hadn't either, said Marty. Kate laughed. Why don't you want to go back again, said Robin. Rashim made a face and looked up in the air. I don't think I would succeed, he said. And besides, my last life was not so bad, but the two before that. He rolled his eyes and fell silent. But if your last life wasn't as bad, suggested Robin, maybe it's because you're getting better at it. Rashim smiled sadly. I have considered that, he said, but it was nothing I did. In my second life, my wife was unfaithful to me, though I loved her. And in my last life, too, I loved my wife, but she was not. He shook his head. Chance. Kate frowned. Maybe not. Rashim looked at her. Maybe he's trying to make things easier for you. Then he made his first wife cheat on him, said Robin angrily. Kate shrugged. I'm afraid to try again, said Rashim, and I'm tired. We're going to find a way out, said Marty. Rashim said nothing. Rashim accompanied them on their journey wherever they were headed. He did not believe there was much hope of escape, but he was tired of being alone. Sometimes they would ask him about his lives and his homes. He had not always lived in India. In his first life, or at least the first he could remember, he had been an Aborigine in Australia. They were all impressed by this, which puzzled him. It was not much of a life, he said. I did not live very long. He told them stories of hunting and religion and people he had known, but the more he spoke of it, the more he missed it. It was not that he missed any particular life, only life on earth itself. Mad desires would come over him to taste honey, smell a woman's perfume, or look straight into the sun. He feared what this meant. I think I am becoming sick for home, he finally said. Which one? Said Marty. We can visit them all if you want. But Rashim did not believe him. He thought the three of them were very nice and good conversationalists, but they were young and silly. They did not know much. He did not think they would ever devise a plan to reach Earth short of redeployment. It saddened his heart for them and for himself. I am thinking of trying again, he confessed to them one night. They were sick to death of walking, though not tired, and though the light did not suggest night, they called it that and sat in a circle. Kate held her hands over empty space between them, palms down, and turned them back and forth from time to time. Marty prowled some 20 feet off from them, scouring the dust with his eyes, stooping from time to time to pick up nothing and tuck it under his arm. Robin and Rashim sat opposite each other, Kate between them, and watched her. Cold night, said Kate. Sure, said Robin, then glanced at Rashim. It had been Kate's idea to play bonfire. Marty volunteered to go collect firewood while Kate built a small wedge from non-existent sticks and newspaper. The other two consented to sit with her around the imaginary flame. They did not have much to say about it. They were afraid their idea of this fire they could not see might somehow differ from hers and shadow the illusion by too many contradictions. So they watched and waited. Most nights, or what Kate called nights, they would play at something like this. It was Let's Pretend, but much harder than anything they'd ever done as children. Playing house in the yards back home that at least had leaves and berries to collect, and bushes or trees to nest in. There were thunderstorms to threaten them sometimes, or the vicious, man-hungry squirrel. Here all threats were brought on by them alone and dispelled in the same manner. Sometimes they would play freeze tag or red light, green light, because hide and seek was out of the question. Rashim did not usually participate, but sometimes he liked to be the stoplight and pivot in a flash. The girls he could not catch, but Marty would be falling all over himself, trying to stand still. Robin seemed most ashamed by the games, for the other two were not ashamed at all. In fact, she seemed most ashamed and troubled by most things. Rashim concluded she was more mature than the other two, and lonelier. How long have you three been together here? He asked the girls. Hard to say, said Kate. A long time, said Robin. Hard to say, though, said Kate again. You know. Rashim nodded. Marty was wandering in ever-widening revolutions around the campfire. He still stooped from time to time. Rashim watched and pitied him. "He seems to be collecting much firewood," he said. Kate nodded. "Do you think you will try again if you cannot find escape before much longer?" Kate opened her mouth, cocked her head to one side, and shut it. Robin said nothing. "It seems like suicide," said Kate finally, "to me." "Why?" asked Rashim. "Because it would mean forfeiting my life," said Kate. "What life?" Robin snorted. "You're already dead." "Not really," said Kate. "Well, what do you call this?" "Life," said Kate. The two girls stared at each other. Robin seemed angry. Kate resigned. "If you were sentenced to life imprisonment, how would you feel about your life then?" Robin said. "I don't know," said Kate. "I'd kill myself," said Robin. "No," said Kate. "What would be the point? There wouldn't be anything for me to look forward to. I'd be stuck in prison my whole life, and it would suck." "Something might happen," said Kate. "Like what?" Kate shrugged. "Maybe they'd have an arts and crafts class set up, and you'd start going, and you'd learn how to paint beautiful watercolors." "Maybe I wouldn't." "Maybe you wouldn't," said Kate. "Maybe you wouldn't." Robin fell silent and stared down at her shoes. Rashim had never seen the girls fight before. He was embarrassed. Suddenly Kate rose and started off toward Marty. When she was near enough, she too began to bend and sweep at the ground. She did not speak to Marty. "Maybe you are wiser than your friends," said Rashim. Robin didn't answer. "Reincarnation is not a bad way." "I think it is," said Robin. "But I just don't know a better way," said Robin. "Maybe you have been with your friends too much recently." Robin shrugged. "There is no other way into heaven." "I don't want into heaven," said Robin. "They've got assholes working there." Rashim studied her. "Excuse me if I am wrong," he said, "but you do not seem happy here." Robin didn't answer. She picked at her shoe. "Are you?" Robin shrugged. "I wasn't particularly happy on Earth. This isn't much worse." "It isn't?" "No." Robin shook her head. "It's just boring." "But you can't stay here forever." "I know," said Robin. "They know it too." "I'm not sure they do," said Rashim. "I think they do," said Robin. "But how long are you going to wait?" Again Robin shrugged. "They are bossing you about," said Rashim. "No, they're not," said Robin irritably. Rashim looked away from her to see Marty and Kate drawing closer. "I would like to speak with you again," he said in a low voice. Robin didn't respond. Marty leaned between them and dumped nothing. Then he brushed at his hands. "It's a little damp," he said, "but we can smoke it out." When no one said a word, Marty clapped his hands together. "Who wants to play a game?" That night, when the three friends were meditating peacefully, Rashim sat up. He had waited a long time, lying with his eyes closed, counting in his head until the others slipped deeply enough away. Once he had stood and double-checked the other two, he tiptoed over to Robin and began to shake her gently. Robin jerked up and frowned at him. "What?" she said. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he whispered, "but we need to talk." "What about?" said Robin. Rashim put a finger to his lips and motioned her to follow him. After a moment, she did. When they were some 50 feet off, he stopped walking. "I'm going to redeployment," he said. "When?" asked Robin. "Soon," he said. "Probably when they are done resting." Robin said nothing, and so Rashim went on. "Is it possible they would consider joining me?" "I doubt it," said Robin. "Would you?" Robin didn't answer. "What will you do otherwise?" "Probably what we've been doing all along." Rashim nodded. "Except I think your friends may be going a little crazy." "They're okay," said Robin. "They were okay when I met you," said Rashim slowly. "They were more like you. But you have stayed the same, and they have become like little children." "They're like that," said Robin. "They like to play games." "That is all they like to do, I fear. I am afraid they are not going to find their way out of here." "They might," said Robin. "I do not wish to interfere," said Rashim, "but I do not think they will. And you should not be pulled down with them." Robin frowned at him. "I am not asking you to be selfish," he said. "But if secretly you wish to try again, and they prohibit you, then you must free yourself." Robin looked again back at her friends. She frowned. They'll try to talk you out of it. They will not succeed, said Rashim. They're my friends, said Robin. They will take care of each other. They are in love. Robin looked slowly back at him. They will be all right, said Rashim. When they begin to tire of seeking escape, they will follow you. I don't know, said Robin, if they will. They have each other, said Rashim. Slowly, Robin nodded. Rashim put a tentative hand on her shoulder. It is the right thing, he said. You must save yourself. Robin shook her head. They might worry. We'd better talk to them first. They might want to come, or just to tell them so they know. Do you think they will let you go? They can't stop me. Robin laughed a little. But would they even try? She had seen Marty sneaking kisses when he thought she wasn't looking, and Kate was disgusted with her. They might not even try, especially if she wanted to go. No, said Rashim. Perhaps they will let you go. Robin was confused. What if they let her go? I don't know, she said. We can wait until they wake, said Rashim. No, said Robin. She took a deep breath and exhaled it. It isn't that. I mean, if we're going to go, we might as well go now. Then let us go, said Rashim. Robin bit her lip. I, at any rate, will go now, he said. Robin glanced at him. Why do you want to do it again? She said. Rashim shrugged. This is no alternative, he said. Robin nodded. Let's go. Excellent. Rashim patted her shoulder as they moved off, though she wished he would not. He spoke of things on earth, places she had loved to hear about, but now she was not really listening. Those were my best friends, she said, over and over, but not to him. Somehow he had lived too many lives, even had too many wives. He would not understand. Chapter 21. I wore my black dress to the rally with my black shoes and those black hose I bought. I put on lipstick and I hairsprayed my hair, and I thought I was looking pretty wicked when we stepped out the front door. The Civic Auditorium's only 5 blocks away, and he had the car anyway, so we walked. And lots of people looked at me on the way, even though I had my coat covering most of it. It's getting chilly now. I know they were looking at me and not Mama or Roberta, because their eyes stuck that way people's do when they don't even know they're staring. And besides that, they just were. You could tell. Their eyes stuck, and then I dropped my lower red lip at the men a little bit, but I wouldn't look after that. I did that to a boy next to me when we were going in, and he said, "Hi there." "Hi," I said. "How are you?" Because he was cute, but even so, he wasn't my type. He had on ugly pants. "Happy to be here," he said, "with such nice scenery." I looked around and then realized he was talking about me, so I looked back at him and slid my shiny lips into a long smile and walked away. I was going to say something mean or sneaky, but I didn't. You don't really want to get yourself embroiled with boys like that. Most of the people were smiley and talking until we got into the arena where people were pretty quiet, and we found our seats without much trouble. Mama kept her coat on because she was cold, always is, but I took mine off and helped Bobby with hers. Looking around, I began to notice other women looking a lot more wicked than me. Makeup and legs showing and all, and it occurred to me how silly I am, because no one ever said makeup was a sin, or short skirts either. No one ever said that. And I know of 2 different girls who had babies without husbands, and they're both born again. So I don't know what I was thinking. I am really more judgmental than the Lord, because all he asks is that you believe in him, whereas I say people ought to behave themselves and be nice. "Here comes your daddy," said Mama, and we looked up, because Roberta and I had been looking at a very fat man through her binoculars that I gave her for her birthday. She had been snickering, but I was thinking the woman next to him must be his wife, and I hoped she stayed on top when they did it. But even then, she'd have to straddle quite a bit, and I felt sorry for her. So we started talking, and we all smiled. Mama was so proud and listened. He is a gentle man, I give him that. And he looked handsome up there in his one suit. And he said what they all say, but gently. And Mama got tears in her eyes, and I just know she loves him more than my daddy, who was a good man too, and much smarter. But he didn't tell us to come up and testify or anything, which he does a lot when he's preaching here in town. They only had him up there about 12 minutes because he was an opening act after all, and that whole time some people never sat down to listen to him. They just milled about like pillbugs in a ditch. We had another seat saved for him, and he did come up for a while and sit with us. But when he saw me, he just looked a bit and said, "You look real good, Lenny." He didn't leer like other men. He held hands with Mama. He spent most of the time down with the others, men of his trade, one woman too. Mama smiled a lot, and I thought about how wicked I am, even though I am right and they are mistaken, and I almost started to cry. But it wouldn't matter if I was saved, because I'd still be the way I am, wishing some stupid man would try to seduce me so I could feel halfway pretty. I probably wouldn't really let him, and that's why it's got to be a stupid man. But the thought's still there, and they say God knows these things. God's letting a lot of the wrong people into his kingdom and keeping some good ones out. I wonder if Daddy will still be happy to see me, if he's been on fire or lying in vomit all this time. I don't really think he is, though. I just can't believe it. A big shot came on stage and his singers with him, and every one of those women had on more hairspray than me, you could tell, the way their hair was defying gravity. I hate these singers and their songs, but I know a lot of them by heart because Roberta hums them at night when she's waiting to fall asleep. This big shot got too much applause, and he talked, and I took up the binoculars and saw some folks crying. One thing about these rallies, they're not too boring. There's always a lot happening. People's souls get up to do a tap dance. Still in all, I was kind of wishing I'd flirted more with that boy with the ugly pants. He was just the type to want to sneak off to a broom closet, and then when we got there, I'd give him a wet, wonderful kiss and say, "You mind your manners now," which he wouldn't, meaning I could storm off in a tizzy and he could punch the wall and call me bitch or something like it. It would have been entertaining, but I just didn't feel like it. So while I'm thinking all this, people start parading toward the stage, just like with Jimmy. We sit and watch them, and then my mama stands and looks at us. "Are you going?" I say. She nods. Roberta gets up too and looks at me. "Come on," she says. "I'll wait for you," I say. Bobby stares at me a minute, then she looks at Mama. "Why doesn't Lenny have to go?" "You don't have to either," says Mama, "but you want to, and Lenny doesn't." Bobby sits down again. "I'll wait here," she says. "We'll watch you through the binoculars." My mother doesn't argue. The pull is too strong. She must go where the believers are. She turns and heads off. Something has happened here. Mama knows it, and I guess I do too. But it will never be further remarked upon, like so many things too dangerous to talk about out loud. I give Bobby the binoculars, and she watches Mama move through the crowd, though I can follow her with my bare eyes most of the way. Bobby puts them down suddenly. "How much longer is this?" "Not long," I say. "The rest is tomorrow." "Do we have to go tomorrow, too?" Bobby is a little kid. That's all it means. I tell her probably. Mama'd be mad if we didn't. "She wouldn't," says Bobby. "Only you." I laugh. I guess I don't know why I came. I didn't want to upset Mama, and then I got dressed, and I did. I don't know why I do these things, but somehow it matters to upset her, and I'm not very good at it on my own. When we got home, I took off the shoes and hose and rubbed away the lipstick, what was left of it. Mama was off at a party with him, so I saw Roberta off to bed, and then I just sat in the darkness for a while in my dress and thought impossible thoughts. There was a moon, and I thought how I wanted to dance and spin under its light and sing. I wanted to run like a wild thing and wear a great gypsy skirt that flirted with the wind. I wanted to lose the power of speech. People would come to me and say, "Who are you, child?" But I would only whirl past them like mist and be gone. I would have tragic eyes, the kind that come back to you in your dreams. And when they woke in the night, their soul would be heavy, for that thing they almost had was still there outside the window. Soon it would go. I was still sitting there when the car pulled up and parked along the curb. I let the curtain fall before they ever shut off the motor, went to my room, and undressed in the dark. Chapter 26. Chloe lived to a ripe old age. She met a man in college and she married him. They had 3 children. They were brought up in the church. 2 of her children, Josie and Mike, refused to go on Sundays as soon as they reached high school. The third, Richard, was quite devout. For most of her maternal life, Chloe worried over her first 2. She tried very hard to show them the light. They refused to see. They were as maddeningly stubborn as she herself had once been. But in whatever depths of desperation, she never resorted to telling them the facts of her own conversion. She knew they would pronounce her insane. On her deathbed, she was not frightened, hardly sad. Everyone around her in the days leading up to her death, which came from simple old age, was amazed at her calmness, her happy anticipation. "You seem so sure there's something in store for you," said one old friend on her final visit. Chloe would pass away that very night in her sleep. "There is," said Chloe, "something better than this." She patted her friend's hand reassuringly. Over the years, while remaining true to the facts of her brother's visit, Chloe had unavoidably embellished a few of his words, lent them added luster and promise. Heaven, for instance, was to be a wonderful place where no one was ever bored. The gates, which Marty had in fact mentioned, were to be swung open upon her arrival. Trumpets would blare, and who should be waiting there to welcome her inside those gates but the one she'd been waiting so long to see, her long-gone brother Marty. She was a little apprehensive about the meeting. Hadn't Kate said something about him getting a new body? How would she recognize him? And how would he recognize her? She was not a red-headed girl with knobby knees anymore. Her knees had rounded out rather substantially in later years, as had the rest of her. Still and all, they were smart up in heaven. Marty would know her. When Chloe said, "Soon I'll be seeing my brother Marty," people thought she was an inspiration of faith and loyalty, to still have such fond attachments to a brother she had not seen in 68 years. Her husband was already dead 4 years at this time. People were surprised that her talk of being reunited was always with her brother Marty and not her husband, or her parents. Chloe did not explain herself, and besides, she was not asked. At the time of her death, Chloe was having a very vivid dream, and so it was a little mystifying trying to judge where life ended and afterlife began. The dream went like this. Chloe was at a board meeting. She was apparently some hotshot executive seated with a half-dozen others like her around a big wooden table. She was herself, but herself 40 years ago, in the height of her womanly beauty and charms. These had been substantial. She did not seem to be married because one of the other executives in his suit and tie leaned across and asked her out to dinner, and she accepted with much grace. They had apricot kolaches at the meeting, and nobody was eating them, so Chloe began to. Somebody was standing up at the front of the room with a pointer, droning on about a chart he had posted there, but he stopped when Chloe started chewing. He cleared his throat. "And what are you doing?" "I'm eating a kolache," said Chloe, brushing crumbs from her upper lip and jelly from her lower. "And what, pray tell, is a kolache?" he asked, and everybody else leaned forward for her answer. "A kolache? Surely you know what a kolache is." Chloe looked down at the gooey pastry she had so recently held in her hand, but now it was not at rest. It was floating about 6 inches above her palm. As she watched, the kolache rose higher and floated to the closed door of the boardroom. She rose, opened the door, and watched her apricot friend float out into the hallway. She decided to follow. They came out into an open space. There was a skylight above her and a fountain many stories below. Chloe leaned on the protective railing and watched her kolache float out over the open space and up until it disappeared through the skylight. There is a way out, thought Chloe, but how did he get through? She climbed out and perched herself atop that railing. She wondered if she should follow. But how did he get through? There were shouts behind her. Chloe turned, wondering at the commotion. It was the men in their business suits rushing toward her, looks of panic, horror splattered across their faces. Why, thought Chloe, already feeling herself receding from them, they think I'm going to jump. But I'm going to fly. I only have to let go. She let go, and she fell, the spray of the fountain rushing to meet her. She opened her mouth to scream. And then she was rising, past the first floor, the fifth, past those men in gray gaping at her, and on up through the skylight. For of course that had been the secret, simply to pass through. And there was the sky, and she was flying, or rising. She did not need to hold out her arms. She was not catching wind currents. In fact, there was no wind at all. Chloe didn't feel a thing. She looked down at her hand. She held it out in front of her and made it wave. But she couldn't feel it. She tried to bite her tongue, but if she succeeded, she didn't know it. I can't feel a thing, thought Chloe. She passed through some clouds and saw another body ahead of her, moving up in much the same way she was. Chloe picked up the pace. "Hello," she called. It was a man. He turned and looked at her. "Hello," he said back. And she noticed his mouth didn't move. What's more, it seemed now that what she'd heard had not been hello at all, but rather buongiorno. Chloe asked him if he was Italian. "I was," said the man. "I'm dead now." Chloe laughed. "You don't look dead." "Well, neither do you," said the man. "So there you have it." "But you see, I don't believe I am dead." "Well, why not?" said the man. "How else could you be talking to me? For I am surely dead, and what's more, you're riding up with me on the ascenolator." Chloe was confused. She looked down at her feet. She couldn't see a thing but her brown, soft leather pumps. "Perhaps I am dead after all," she said. "I'll just have to wait and see." "I know I'm dead," the man said again. "I've already had my out-of-body experience. I saw them cutting on me on that operating table and making a mess of it, I'll tell you. But I couldn't feel a thing. Still can't." "I can't either," cried Chloe. "I've been biting my tongue continuously, I think, and it simply doesn't hurt." "You're dead," he said. Chloe McShane. She thrust her right hand forward. Vincent Lupatelli. They shook, though neither could feel the other. In fact, their hands slid around each other quite a few times before they got a good grip. This made Chloe laugh. "I'm going to see my brother Marty," she said. "My wife Olympia." "I'm married too," said Chloe. "That is to say, I was. I imagine he's up there too." Vincent looked at her a long time. He smiled. "I find this whole prospect very exciting," said Chloe. "I haven't seen my brother in 68 years. "You don't look your age," said Vincent. They continued to ascend. At the top, Vincent stepped off and Chloe followed close behind. The gates were as shining and as lovely as she had known they would be, but they were not swung open, and she did not see anyone she recognized waiting out front to greet her. Vincent had already gotten in line. He motioned Chloe over, and she got in behind him. Swallowing her initial disappointment, she put a bright face on things. "This is all very efficient," she said. Vincent nodded. He was next in line. "I'm a little nervous," she confessed. Vincent patted her shoulder, stepped forward, and gave his name. The next minute he was led to a door set in the pearly wall, to be sure, but nothing close to a gate, and let in. Chloe watched the door shut behind him. She gave her name. The man at the desk found her name almost immediately. "This is your lucky day, Mrs. McShane." Yes, she said. "I feel the same." She was led inside, and there, near a bright tinkling fountain, much like the one in her dream, was her family, beaming and calling out her name. Her mother and father, not as they had been at death, but as she had known them in her youth, even before Marty died. Her Aunt Agnes was there, her best friend Jenny, and her husband Hank. There were people she didn't know there, too, smiling at her. Friends made, she supposed, up here in heaven. She went about hugging each one, though she knew they couldn't feel it any more than she could. When she had given hugs all around and stopped laughing and crying, she sighed a very happy sigh and asked, "Where's Marty?" An embarrassed silence fell on the group, though there was no coughing, because nobody coughs in heaven or clears their throat. "Didn't he know I was coming today?" Her mother smiled daintily at her and said, "Marty isn't with us, dear. He's not inside." "Well, where is he?" Some of them glanced at the door Chloe had so recently entered through, others at the shining cobblestones at their feet. "We don't know," said her mother. "He's outside. He didn't believe. But perhaps someday." Chloe stared at her. She turned and stared at Hank, who nodded slowly. "I'd like to talk to Jesus," said Chloe, "or God. Whoever. I don't think everything's up front here. I think a few things need explaining." "And we'll explain it all," said Hank. "Anything you want. But there's plenty of time for that. Right now, we thought maybe you'd like a little tour. "I am not the one requiring an explanation here," said Chloe. "I am about to provide it. You say my brother is outside because he doesn't believe in God. What is he doing outside? No one knows. But then no one really seems to care. Is he starving? I don't know. Do people need food up here?" She waited until someone shook their head. "Is he warm enough? I hope so. Is he happy? Well, apparently he's not supposed to be, but I'll tell you this. I am here for my great fidelity to God. He is not for his lack of it. At the time of my brother's death, 68 years ago, I was an atheist. He came back to Earth just to tell me about this place so I could get in. And all this time, I have been waiting for this day to get up here to tell him he is a dear, dear, good person, something I never told him when he was alive because I was too stupid, a dear person who saved my soul by bothering to make that visitation when I was a little brat. And now you tell me he is banished for non-belief when he was just unlucky enough to die before me. Does it matter that he believes now? That he believed 3 hours after his death? No. It doesn't matter. And I must say to you, you dear people who I've been waiting so long to see, although I grant I have never seen some of you before in my life, that I cannot stay in this shining place of yours which I have entered under false pretenses. Because you see, my dears, Jesus is not my Savior. He is your Savior, but not mine, because it's Marty who came to earth for me, to save me from my sins. It is he who saved me from the fires of hell, and I have no choice but to search him out and join him in his cast-out oblivion, wherever he may be." Then she threw her arms around Hank and wept like a child. They sat with her for several hours, or what seemed like it, speaking of the future, the past, of life on earth and in heaven. She saw their memories of mortal life were fading, but then it had been a long time for some of them. There remains free will in heaven, as in most places. Chloe chose to leave that place, and they could not dissuade her. Hank offered to come along, but Chloe said no. She herself had not had enough time to sink into the niceties of life in heaven as he had. She felt the uprooting from paradise might be too much for him. Her father brought one of the minor saints, St. Tulipius, over to speak with her, but he had no more luck than the others. "A grave injustice has been done," said Chloe. "I cannot rest in peace. I am so sorry." "Bless you, my child," said the saint, who looked to be about 16 years old if he was a day. "And who will bless my brother?" Chloe felt she ought to be blowing her nose, but she really didn't need to. It was one of the bonuses in heaven. And so she rose, and they walked with her to the door. "I hope to be reunited with all of you soon," said Chloe. They all looked very sad, but no one was crying save her. She still retained the gift of human tears. "Yes," said her mother, "God willing." Chloe laughed, and she felt the vibration rumbling in her stomach. She felt something wet on her cheeks. She was already leaving them before she reached the door, and then she did, and was gone. Chapter 27. I have considered becoming a nun. I have wanted to devote myself to something big. Wanted to pull my hair back from my face and become very pale. Wanted to be with God in a little chapel and kneel as the sun shifts, shines through a rose-colored pane of glass, and the rose light falls onto me. Be with him in that light, the two of us there together. But my mind, rebels against such devotion. No one should demand it or even accept it. I have examined all routes to happiness, and God is best. The others are not guaranteed to all men. God is not either, in truth. I am incapable of entering into the rose-colored light. I could get to the church, but never get the right spot under the window. If there is no point, there is no point in continuing. There is no point in not continuing. No action is forced into being by this pointlessness, emptiness. Discipline hasn't helped me, or lack of it. I'm not indignant now. Indignance is a luxury of the uninformed. I am so very uninformed. My brain has gone too far. It is a rash, disobedient child who did not try to anticipate consequences. It has done badly by me. I have been thinking about Eve tonight as I sit here with this bottle. I have been thinking how all through history women have been put down because of her. How men are better because a woman talked Adam into sinning instead of a snake. And do you think that snake would have had less luck with old Adam? If Satan's sin was pride, then I suppose Eve's was curiosity. Adam's was lust. And if Eve is more curious than Adam, well, what does that say about womankind? That we've got more active minds. And how is Eve supposed to know not to listen to this Satan? And why shouldn't she eat a goddamn apple? When someone tells you not to do something, but they don't tell you why, well, then it's only human nature to run out and do that very thing. So Eve had some guts. And if it's human nature to run out and eat that apple because God said not to, well, why did he curse us with such a nature? What is the point of free will if you can only choose one thing? Knowledge is not freedom. You may know you are a slave, but that does not make you free. And what are we? Free will. We weren't free before, and we're not free now. So Eve wanted to know what was going on. She made that mistake. For Eve's grave impertinence, God showed just retribution, subservience to man. God is a jokester, all right. He's the one that struck that outsider down, the one from the wrong tribe, when he tried to stop the Ark of the Covenant from falling down in the dirt. Struck him down with lightning because the man revered God so much he wouldn't let his goddamn wooden crate drop in the dirt. If Jesus came back to earth tomorrow and walked up to me at work and said, "Lenny, I'm here, worship me," how would I know what to do? Charles Manson said he was Jesus and apparently wasn't, but still he thought he was. And if a man comes up to my coffee station and says, "Worship me," and I do, and it's not Jesus, then I'll have been worshiping a false god, which is breaking a commandment, which is a no-good sin. This is a trap. If it's Jesus and I say, "Yeah," and I'm Eleanor Roosevelt, then Jesus will smile and say, "Poor Lenny," and walk away because I blew my chance. Oh, I don't want to die, not ever, but I will, so why not now? I am too stubborn and too goddamn smart to change. This is stupid. They will not be waiting for me when I come. How could they? They don't know I exist, do they? No, they don't, and that's not all they don't know. They don't know a thing. But they're not stupid because they don't exist. You can't be stupid in a case like that. I won't be stupid anymore when I'm dead. It's impossible. But they've never been stupid. They've never even been dead. My dad is dead, but not stupid. He never was. I wonder if I'll see Dad. I doubt it. They don't do favors for people in hell. I've got the bottle here. It won't be messy. It won't hurt. I just need lots of water, and I've got that too. They call it cause and effect. What is the reason, little girl, for the way you are? That's all you need, and you're excused. Just why? And you'll be skipping rope with your friends around the corner. I am who am. That's all. It stops and starts and stops soon enough. If I was Eve, I would have killed myself the minute I knew the score. You will bring 4 children in pain seems hardly right, while Adam gets off scot-free in the whole exchange. Because, you know, Adam was tempted by a woman, not an immortal being, and that makes all the difference in the world. Well, I guess I've been talking up a storm with no precipitation, so I'm not too slick. I guess it's time I did the dirty deed, though I want to cry, really, thinking of it. It's not that I'm so fond of this world, but you know there are Roberta and Jason, and maybe after downtown dies, maybe that is a sign, will be the sign, that it's my time to go. But I'm chicken-hearted. You must be spitting on me. Stick these excuses in your nearest trash receptacle. People would pay to see what I'm about to do. Just a few minutes more sitting here, and then I think the boredom of this place will hit me again. I am so very bored. Things don't happen to me. What amusing anecdotes can I tell you in my finest hour as you wait and watch? Shall I tell you of my father? No, he's not good enough for your fine ears. He left me here on earth to pour coffee for other human beings. Human beings like you, Lenny. No, not like me. No one is like me. This is not conceit. I am not close to proud. In my next life, I will be just like Sandra Ott. She is like everyone on earth. But surely she must hate herself being like that. Is there some despair in her soul? Where does the difference fall? Can she tap dance, play the harmonica? Does she laugh too loud at movies? Sandra, I would not be you for $1 million, but give me the money and I will give it right back if you will tell me this one thing. What is wrong with you? I swear I will not tell. For $1 million, she would not spill the beans, and I haven't got close to it anyway. God is not rational, and without reason, he cannot be truly good. Good intentions are useless without a good brain. But I will know soon enough. He will talk to me soon enough, or I shall haunt the earth until he does. I shall haunt the chapels of rose-colored glass and witness the trees that fall in the forest and the sparrow that falls from its nest. I shall usurp God's eyes until the planet cries, God, where are you? And he will say, I am here, but I am blind. Lenny stole my eyes. I will speak with her. I will get them back. And he will come to me in my business suit, my briefcase laid out before me, and God will propose his deal. And when the deal gets good, and I will know, then my work shall be done. I'll rest in peace. Chapter 28. This is the last chapter. When the girl came to, she was not alone. She put the palms of her hands to her face and rubbed. She dug into her closed eyelids and rubbed harder. Then she opened her eyes. She looked up. How are you, dear? All right, said the girl. Her companion was an old woman with gray hair and a wide torso, wearing no shoes but thick, fuzzy lavender ankle socks. You look better, said the woman. This made the girl smile. She wondered better than what. She looked back at the old woman. Needless to say, I almost missed you, said the old woman. I was just resting here about 10 feet off when you appeared from nowhere. Gave me a good scare, but you need those once in a while if you want to keep on your toes. The girl smiled again and shook her hair out of her face. Where'd you come from? Earth, originally, said the woman. How about you, dear? Earth. The girl looked away out over the grayness. She heard the woman sigh. She knew she was relieved. The girl bit her bottom lip to keep from smiling any more. "Have you seen anyone?" "Not recently," said the old woman. "I'm looking for my brother, though." The girl looked back at her. "He wasn't in heaven, so I came out here to look around. You're the first soul I've seen since then." "What's your name?" asked the girl. "Chloe," said the woman, "Chloe McShane. But that's my married name. My brother's name is Martin." The girl said nothing in response to this. The old woman wasn't even sure she'd heard. "I'd better be on my way soon now," said the old woman. "Not that it gets dark here, but when you've got an unfailing purpose like mine, it's best to keep it in mind at all times." The girl stood. "Yes," she said. "Thank you for your concern." Then she said nothing and looked at the old woman for so long, with such undisguised feeling, that the old woman blushed. She felt a little bad, as if she ought to know the girl from somewhere. "I'm sorry," said the girl finally. "I was just thinking what a coincidence for us to meet like this. When, I could have come out anywhere at all, and you could have sat down 10 minutes later. It seems strange. It does strike one as providential." She patted the girl on the shoulder. "Maybe you should walk with me for a while." The girl nodded quietly. She brushed at the dust on her dress and pulled at her hair. "That's an awfully pretty dress," said the old woman. They moved along slowly, for she was no spring chicken. "Were you buried in it?" "I suppose so," said the girl. "It's my best one, anyway." It was black. "I certainly wish they'd stuck me in my funeral dress," said the old woman. "In my dream, I was still young and pretty like you, but once I left that place, I got stuck back in this old thing. I think it's a punishment," she hissed. Then she looked over her shoulder. "Maybe I dreamt that whole part. Sometimes it's hard to know where one thing ends off and another begins. Sometimes I wonder if all my days leading up to this one weren't a big dream all mashed together." The girl shook her head to show she understood in not understanding. "You start feeling unreal after a while," said the old woman. She steadied her feet while they walked. "But these purple things always bring me back. They make me think of June." "What do they make you think of?" "Well," the girl considered. "Cotton candy, I guess." The old woman clapped her hands together. "How nice it is to have someone to talk to again. What's your name, dear? You see I'm losing all my manners." "Lenny," said the girl. "Lenny Haines." "That's a boy's name," said the old woman. "You don't look like a boy to me. We can call you Lydia or Marilyn or Cynthia. Maybe you like it as is." She stopped and put a hand on the girl's arm. "Lenny Haines?" The girl nodded. She waited and studied the old woman's face. The old woman studied hers in turn. "The man who sold us our first house was a Haines, Arthur Haines. Do you know him?" The girl shook her head. "Ah, well." The old woman sighed and began to move again, her hand still resting on the girl's arm. It was a big world. The progress they made was slow, the talk sporadic, but this did not seem to matter. From time to time, the girl would look to the old woman, and the old woman would pat her arm as if in reassurance, quite at peace with one another. Or to one who didn't know better, like two old friends who have weathered life and lived to tell the tale.